Who's ever heard of trash streams? Well, trash streams, which are predominantly Russian, are where you stream and the viewers tip you to do awful things. You could say that they're dares, but the key part here is that people are tipping you, giving you money to get you to do them. Now, this stuff usually consists of being horrible to somebody else, humiliating them, beating them, hitting them, and whatever else. Stas Reeflay is the person we're talking about today. He was a trash streamer in Russia, and he killed his girlfriend for a $1,000 tip. He didn't intend to kill her, but what he did was just absolutely evil. Before we get into it, let's not forget the disclaimers. This is a true crime. It involves real people. Them real people have real families. So although I do want you to comment and I do want you to share, please do so with sensitivity. Born in 1990, 30-year-old Stanislav Reshetnikov was known as Stas Reeflay. And obviously, I want to call him Stas because that is so much easier to say. It's really hard to get a good gauge on how many subscribers he had, or even when he started his channel, because his channel's been deleted, and for some reason reporters have completely missed out that information. But I also found that he apparently had over 4,000 subscribers at the time of this incident. His girlfriend was 28-year-old Valentina Grigorieva, so she was 2 years younger than him, and she'd be described by Stats and his viewers as a genius, an actress, and she graduated with honours. She'd also recently announced on a stream that she was in the early stages of pregnancy with his baby. However, that is something that is massively debated. Both Stas and Valentina were Russian nationals. They were living in Ivanovka in Russia. Valentina blogged and featured on Stas's channel quite often. And although Valentina was the subject of this trash stream quite a lot, she wasn't the only victim. There was a disabled guy who Stas would hit repeatedly on his lives. He made him drink oil and even got a tattoo of the viewers' names live on the stream. At one point, Stas had even drove an ex-girlfriend to attempt to take her own life. One of the most reoccurring people on Stas's trash streams was an homeless guy that he'd brought in, he'd give him shelter, give him food, give him drinks. Now, that sounds like a lovely thing to do, right? But let's remember, this is Stas we're talking about. It weren't just shelter, food and drink that we were offering. This homeless guy immediately became the subject of these trash streams. He'd beat him, he'd slap him, he'd spit in his face, he'd crack eggs on his head when he weren't paying attention, he chucked buckets of ice water on him while he was sleeping. At one point, he even peed into a cup and asked the viewers to pay to get him to pour it over his head. But nobody paid for that. Instead, what they paid for was to make him drink it. And that's what this guy did. However, this guy has always said he's okay with this abuse. At one point, the police even apparently approached this guy and were like, look, do you need help? And this guy was like, no, it's okay, I'm a willing victim. I don't have a problem with it, it's fine. Even though this stream were making quite a lot of money and this guy were receiving very little of it. And apparently one day this guy did decide that he'd had enough. So he was texting some friends, trying to make some arrangements and get help. And in a result, Stas got his phone and threw it off the roof of threw it from a height of where they were living and broke the phone. Then after 6 months of being on the stream, this guy did get away. But it turned out he'd gone back to being homeless, he was then desperate for food and drink, so he returned back to Stas's grip. There's also a video of Stas beating a woman up. He hits her and gets her on the floor and he's beating her on the floor. And most of these streams, he's got friends there watching. So just imagine being in a room with someone that's streaming themselves beat up a girl. I certainly don't think I could sit back and watch it, never mind being in the same room. Basically, it's extremely common in his streams for him to beat someone up, and it is more often than not a woman. And like I said, there's always friends there just chilling out, watching, sometimes even participate and help. But despite all these people that were the subject of this abuse, Valentina was quite often the main subject. She'd been pepper sprayed, she'd been beaten, she'd been hit over the head with a plank, and she'd even had hot sauce poured on her face. As well as physical abuse, there was also verbal abuse. He'd berate her and call her names, such as prostitute and smelly, and what other names he came out with. Which I think is quite ironic, calling her a prostitute. I don't know if she did sleep with people for money, but at the end of the day, he's the one that's doing horrible things to get money off strangers that he's never met. And I mean, these are really horrible videos. They're very brutal, and I'm not one to say, oh, it's hard to watch, but these videos are really hard to watch. I mean, in the video where he pepper sprayed Valentina, she was already laid on the sofa, having a full-on panic attack, crying, screaming, hyperventilating, and he walks over to her and sprays her in the face with pepper spray, causing her to then fall on the floor, rolling around on the floor, screaming. And while she's doing that, he just goes back to his PC, sits down, and carries on with his stream. Now, there were a friend there again, and I think it was the homeless guy, I'm not sure, but he basically, very gently, he didn't put any argument in, he didn't put any fight in, he just basically says, don't do it, he does it, and then they both sit down. This homeless guy then gets up, walks over her, he steps over her, opens the door because there's a massive smell of pepper spray, and then goes and sits back down, stepping over her again. This is absolutely awful stuff to watch. And Valentina's abuse wasn't always at the hands of Stas. One of the videos, Valentina just sat streaming, she's the one that's talking to the camera and stuff, and this woman walks over to her, slaps her a few times, then walks away, then comes back and chucks food on her head and starts slapping her again across her face. And as a result of that, she walks away, and Stas is currently laid behind Valentina on like a sofa bed type thing. He gets up, pushes the woman to the ground, and starts punching her in the face. As a result from that, she had a broken nose. So basically this is just a stream that happens as often as it can, where people get assaulted and treated really awfully. Now, I do also have to say, there's moments in these streams where Stas and Valentina are really cuddly together, they're kissing, all that sort of lovey-dovey stuff. But then moments are quite far and few between. And there's also moments where Valentina's put in a bit of a dark light. There's one point where she stands up with a glass bottle, threatening Stas with it. She tries to smash it on a chair. She fails, mind you. She then picks the chair up and throws it. There's another clip where she's setting his clothes on fire on the sofa bed thing. It was just a massive chaos thing. And apparently they were both heavily into drugs and alcohol. And it really does reflect. These clips are just everywhere. They're chaotic. It is a massive mess. But the most amazing thing is it were all streamed. A lot of it were done for money. And you have to wonder, why? And how was it allowed to stay on? Because Stas's channel was monetized. Although it weren't his primary place to post videos, his channel was monetized and it was deemed as okay. So the stream of Stas's that we've focused on today was on the 2nd of December 2020. Stas had been paid $1,000 US. At the time that were between 8 and 900 British pounds. And that tip was to strip Valentina down into her underwear and throw her outside into the cold on the balcony and lock the door behind him. And Stas accepted. Now, personally, if anyone said strip your missus down on camera, I'll give you £1 million, I'd tell you to do one. But then if you said lock her out in the cold for £1 million, I'd tell you to do one. But to do both and chuck her out, I think I'd phone police on you. This donation was anonymous. And at the time, Stas and Valentina's friend, Marina, was there with them. Right on from the offset, Valentina stands up and she's not happy about it. She's fighting back. She's saying no. Marina grabs hold of her. Stas is grabbing hold of her. And then eventually Stas pushes her back down onto a chair. At this point, Valentina's like, I've had enough. She pulls out a knife and she's like, right, you seriously get away from me. And I had this so-called friend, Marina. She's smiling while she's trying to grab hold of her. And anyway, after pulling this knife out, Valentina gets up and she storms off. She storms off behind the PC and behind the camera. So it's completely off camera, don't know what happens, but there is a bang, Stas laughs, and then they both run around there, so I assume she's fallen over. Then it sounds like she's been beaten up. The camera turns and they are having a bit of a kerfuffle. Now, shortly after, Stas and Marina, mainly Stas, strips Valentina down to her underwear. Literally, just pants and bra. He then told her that she was smelly, and then she needed to sober up, and then he threw her out into the freezing cold, on the balcony outside, during Moscow's winter. And this, by the way, is early hours of the morning, well before the sun rises. Apparently, it was like -5 degrees out there, and it's also reported by somebody that before or as he was locking her out, he chucked a bucket of water on her. So obviously, Valentina is banging on the door. She's hammering on the door, begging to be let back in. She's furious, and they just ignored her. Now, again, I have to point out, most of the sources say it was 2 hours that she were out on the balcony for. But then the Sun reported it was just 15 minutes. But from watching the video, because I didn't see the video from when he locked her out, I've seen snippets of that bit, and then I've watched all the video from after. But when they lock her out, it's dark outside. When he brings her back in, it's well into sunrise. So it's, in my opinion, it's well over 15 minutes. And like I said, more sources say it's 2 hours. At no point during him kicking her out in her underwear or locking the door behind himself did this friend, this Marina, try and help in any way. And at some point between locking her out and bringing her back in, this friend left the apartment. And after way too long, Stas goes over and opens the door. But he sees that Valentina's collapsed and she's unresponsive. So he drags a lifeless body back in to the apartment. At this point, her body's off camera. It's like around a bit of a corner, it's behind a wall, so you can't see her. He briefly walks over to the PC, looks at what people are saying, and then goes back to her. And he, at this point, is basically saying that she's not responsive, she's not breathing, what am I going to do? And obviously it's all in Russian, so I've had to improvise a bit, I've had to go off what other people have said, I've had to get the auto-generated subtitles off YouTube, and then put them through Google Translate. There's a massive speech barrier here, but he's basically saying she's got no heart rate, there's no heartbeat, she's not breathing. And at one point, which blows my mind, he even asks her to wake up and then says to her, "What's up with you?" Well, it might be something to do with the fact that you just beat her up and then chucked her outside in -5 with no clothes on. But then, prioritising his stream, he drags her back in to the room. You can now see her laid on the floor in her underwear, non-responsive, in full view. At this point, Stas starts coming to her. He's calling her my bunny. "Valia, Valia, damn, you look like you're dead. Bunny, come on, tell me something. I'm worried. Damn, I'm not feeling a heartbeat." Now, Valentina is apparently in the early stages of pregnancy. And I have to say that I've seen the video, or at least a clip, or at least an image of the video where she's declaring she's pregnant. And you can see a bump. It does look like the very early stage of pregnancy. But while she's laid on the floor unconscious, she's very skinny, you can't see any sign of a bump. And later on when he moves her and her head flops towards the floor, again, in the arching of her back, you can still not see anything in her stomach. Her belly goes in past her ribs and stuff. So I have to say that I do agree with the people, other sources that said that she weren't actually pregnant. So I don't know if she lost the baby or if she was faking it. But like I said, a lot of people said she weren't actually pregnant. And from the footage I've seen, I kind of believe that. Stas returned to his PC. He returned to his stream, which was still ongoing despite the fact that he's just found out he's killed his girlfriend. All the time, throughout this first section of the stream, you can see Valentina laid over his shoulder behind him. He tells the viewers, "Guys, no pulse, she's pale, she's not breathing." Apparently it was a viewer that called the emergency services. Now, I'm not too sure about that, because there is a section where he spends about 4 or 5 minutes on the phone while he's kneeling over her, like feeling her neck and stuff. So I have to assume that was the emergency services, because I don't speak Russian, so I can't really put into context what he's saying or what he's talking about. But it is reported that one of the viewers called the emergency services. Throughout this entire ordeal, he's going back and forth between the PC to see what people are saying, and then back to Valentina. Every time he's at his PC, he's having a swag of his alcoholic drink, and at times, he's talking to the camera, being quite high rate. He starts off by feeling Valentina's throat, he's shaking her, he's feeling for a pulse, he's trying to get a response, he's slapping her, trying to wake her up. Then, 2.5 minutes after he's brought her in, he walks back over to her and does a very, very, very poor attempt of a kiss of life. Like, there's no compressions or anything, he just kind of blows into her mouth twice. And then he goes back to his PC and does this really, really rubbish attempt at a fake cry. And it was quite short-lived as well. 4 minutes after he'd brought her into the apartment, he puts his coat on as he walks over to her, because he were just wearing a vest, and now he tries some chest compressions. And again, he's slapping her on the face, trying to wake her up. And he's still going back and forth to Valentina, to his PC, and then he disappears for 2 minutes and comes back on the phone. And this is where I think he's on the phone to the emergency services, because he checks her pulse, he slaps her about a bit more. And then he's on the phone for these couple of minutes, and then he just goes back and sits at his PC. He still does go back and forth, but from this point he's spending more time on his PC than he is with her. After about 15 minutes since he brought her in, he picks her up and he carries her onto the sofa bed thing. Now, all this stream, she's been on the right hand side of the camera, right hand side of the screen. But now he's picked her up and put her on the left side of the screen. He covers her up with a coat and then sits back down. So now you can see her over his right shoulder basically. It's more to the right. You've got a really... Her face is almost as big as his on the screen. It is ridiculous. And obviously this is even worse. Alright, now he's covered her body up, but she's really close to the camera. He then cries to the camera a bit more. And then, after a bit, he turns the camera and zooms in. So now you've got him on the right hand side of the screen and her on the left. It is absolutely bizarre. It's almost as if he's got the camera there waiting for it to wake up. And I can't imagine if that is what he was doing, then my gosh, this boy has absolutely no sense of first aid. Because this entire time she's been in that apartment, 15 minutes, she hadn't had a pulse. So I was expecting her to wake up if that's what we were doing. I have no idea. And I don't think that's what we were doing. I think he knew she was dead right from the very beginning. And all this time while she's over his right shoulder, or behind him on the right hand side, he's now not bothered anymore. He's just streaming as usual. There's no upsetness. If anything, he just looks a little bit tired. And like I said, the sun is rising at this point, so he's probably been up all night and he probably is tired. So it's about an hour and a half after he's brought her in that there's a knock on the door. Now the woman at the door is who I assume is a paramedic. He gets up, answers the door, lets her in. And this bit, to me, is as shocking as the rest of it. Because this paramedic walks over to Valentina's body, looks at her for a few seconds, like completely, oh well, you've messed that up type thing. Moves her arm a little bit, might be checking for a pulse, but if she did, she didn't hold it long. Then feels for a pulse in her neck. And then kind of just goes and sits down at the coffee table and starts writing notes. There was absolutely no check other than a quick feel for the pulse. There were no resuscitation attempts. Absolutely nothing. It was like a lost cause before she'd even walked in. A few minutes later, this paramedic's joined by a colleague. And yes, the live stream is still ongoing. People are still watching this around the world, seeing it in real time. And during this bit of the stream, Stas is now sat with his back towards the camera, looking at the paramedic. So you've got him here, looking at his back. You can still see Valentina there, and you can see the paramedic at the other side of the room. The entire thing is being broadcasted. But even worse than that, the paramedics then just leave. Stas turns round and carries on his live stream. Valentina is still laid dead on the sofa. And his live stream continued until the police arrived. The first reports obviously speculated that Valentina must have succumbed to hypothermia and froze to death. But the forensic evidence examination later concluded that it was actually a head injury that was sustained during the attack that was the cause of death. Valentina had craniocerebral trauma, which, if you don't know, is practically brain damage, and multiple bruising on the face and hemorrhaging of soft tissues. A basic outline of her injuries basically said that she'd sustained very serious head injuries, facial injuries as well, and 3 blows to the face, as well as multiple bruises. Valentina, that day, had been severely beaten before she was put outside in sub-zero temperatures, wearing just her underwear. Stas testified that on the day in question, he hit the deceased several times on the head and admitted beating her. Psychological and psychiatric assessments had been done on Stas, and they found him to be sane and fit to face trial. As Stas went into the court in Moscow, his mom was seen kissing him. At one point, she told people that Stas wouldn't hurt a kitten and was very kind. I mean, sure, you can argue that he wouldn't hurt a kitten and he's a very kind person that wouldn't hurt anybody. But I've seen tons and tons of footage that I wish I'd never seen of him beating people up for money. And these people are friends and girlfriends and whatever else. And he seems to enjoy it. He seems to laugh quite a few times when things like this are happening. Stas's defence basically claimed that this was just a prank that went wrong. And Stas had always claimed that he weren't guilty. Completely outright saying, I didn't kill her. It weren't my punches that killed her. He even claimed that she died of a stroke. He told the media, on my streams, They called her genius. She was an actress who graduated with honours. She truly wanted a real relationship, but I couldn't be with her. You see, she was a prostitute. I don't want a relationship with a girl like that. He was convicted of intentional infliction of grievous bodily harm, dangerous to human life, committed with the use of an object used as a weapon, resulting in the death of the victim by negligence. And for that, the Russian court sentenced him to 6 years in a strict penal colony. 6 years. Wow. A leading Russian senator called for specific legal punishments, including harsher sentences and fines for trash streamers that highlight cruelty. This is becoming more and more widespread, so it is necessary to legislatively respond to the form of activity. Incredibly, as far as I can find, nobody else got charged for this. Not the viewers, not the anonymous person that paid him to do it, not even the woman that helped him do it, which I think is just absolutely atrocious. If anything, the woman that helped him kick her out, the woman that helped him strip her, and I'm fairly sure she testified as a witness, surely she should be punished as well. Now, let me just clarify. I do agree with the Nuremberg Code. I don't care if you've been paid, if it's your job, or whatever other reason you think you have. If you're doing horrible things, you're an horrible person. End of. And if you're receiving this abuse, right, let's get it clear. Because Valentina and the other people that hung around with Stas, including the homeless guy, all think this is fine. And look, he's letting me have an house and he's a cool guy. It's not fine. Even if you consent to being abused, and this is a big thing for domestic abuse, they consent to this abuse and they don't want to make a legal complaint. Now, I understand it's hard to prosecute somebody if the victim won't be a witness, but this is on live stream, and I'm also a massive freedom fan. So fair enough, if you want to do some things, you don't want to do something to somebody like whip them with a towel and then get put in prison for it, don't get me wrong. But for somebody like this, who's constantly beating women up, hitting men, and doing other bizarre things to people on his stream, surely there's a line here where we go, no, that's not okay, this person is put in prison. That's not okay, this person needs squashing. These people don't love you, don't respect you, don't care for you. You're just a tool for them to make money with. Now, another thing. Don't matter if you're not the person doing it. Doesn't matter if you're not the victim that it's been done to. If you're watching this sort of stuff, you're condoning this sort of stuff. If you're paying for this sort of stuff, then you're sick in the head. If you're watching it, you're a bit sick in the head too. But even if it's just on or something, if someone's doing this and they can see that, because apparently there were thousands to tens of thousands, so there were potentially at least 10,000 people watching this stream. That means 10,000 people encouraged this. You can say what you want, but it is encouraging. If a streamer's doing something and they can see that they've got thousands of views, they're going to take that as encouragement. They're going to put it on the back. It's going to gain momentum. It's not right. Stop watching this nonsense. But even worse than that, apparently, these viewers begged him not to stop the stream. This is why he kept the stream rolling for so long. They even paid him to continue the stream. And I have to add as well, I have seen an Instagram account that is called Stas Reeflay. Now, that obviously caught my attention quite a bit. And this channel basically, or this page, basically claims that Stas is innocent. It says, Stas is innocent. Stop believing fake media and corrupt bloggers. Now, I'm all in for a conspiracy. Really do love a good conspiracy. I like to look at conspiracies, put a bit of rational thinking towards it, and see if I believe it. But I can't understand a possible theory as to why you think this guy's innocent. He was literally on camera locking her outside. He brought her back in, she was dead. What, do you think some sort of ninja spy's gone up there and killed her? And quite frankly, to be fair, even if it were proven that Stas didn't kill her, the way that he's treated her, the way that he's treated other people, he deserves at least 6 years just for that. Never mind the murder of his girlfriend. On that note, I'm just going to remind you, have some self-respect, people. Don't do things because people think it's good. Do things because you want to. Don't hurt yourself. Don't let anybody hurt you. Have some self-respect, people. You're worth more than that. And that leads me to say, all I'm saying is, I love you, Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll see you next week. Bye.